Pretty Dece, here we go. Facebook.com/Pretty Dece Show. It's time to geek out with Josh, your host.
Loot boxes have been seeing more and more pushback from gamers in the past year or so, but now it seems like the Federal Trade Commission itself might be stepping in to conduct an investigation. What's up, everybody? I'm Josh Meek, the Uber Geek. Thank you very much for tuning in to Pretty Dece, your entertainment and pop culture podcast. And gamers as a whole have kind of decided that they're not as into loot boxes, but they're showing up in a lot of games. And really that kind of ultimate, the thing that started the pushback and the blowback about loot boxes started with Star Wars Battlefront 2, came out about a year ago. And that was a game that, was kind of half-baked when it came out. It was a $60 game, and it had some issues, but the biggest one was that doing some calculation, people realized that they would have had to have played the game like an astronomical amount of time to unlock Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, the characters that they'd want. It was just going to be a ridiculous amount of time to get those characters without buying into loot boxes, without putting a bunch of extra money into the game. So that's kind of really where that started, and loot boxes are in all kinds of games, and it's only getting worse. And if you're not familiar with the term loot box, just to explain that a little bit, a loot box is a concept in video games where you are putting in money, real money, into the game to get something that you don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be. So you put your $2 or whatever it might be in, and you get a chance at a selection of items. So you might get a common item back out. You might get a super crazy rare item that's worth a lot to you in the game, or is even worth a lot in maybe a secondary marketplace, depending on what game we're talking about. It might be worth a lot just for bragging rights when you play the game online, whatever it may be. But you are putting money into the game with the chance to get something really good back out. And again, it's a thing that shows up all over the place. Tons and tons of games have that concept now, because it clearly has been a very successful endeavor for video game developers and publishers. People apparently will put a ton more money into loot boxes than maybe they would for just buying items outright in a more traditional downloadable content sense. And that kind of addictive nature of loot boxes, that, well, if I just get one more, maybe I'll get the rare item. Well, let me try one more time and one more time, is the thing that is concerning specifically lawmakers now about loot boxes. I think gamers as a whole have been very negative about loot boxes because they're a bad value proposition. No one wants to put $60 into a game only then to have to pump more and more money into the game just to really get a good experience out of it, to get the items you want, whatever. But people that are, in charge of things that our children see and things that our children interact with are worried about loot boxes, in the sense that it's very akin to gambling, and it can lead to these weird addictions that maybe parents don't even see coming, that they are just not educated about. So the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the chairman is Joseph Simons, and the New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan has, I guess, really been, touting this idea that loot boxes need to get investigated. And during an FTC hearing, Hassan was asking some questions, and basically got Simmons, the FTC chairman, to agree to investigate loot boxes and specifically their effect on children and their link to addiction because of this kind of sense of gambling. It'll certainly be an interesting thing when they get around to investigating this. Obviously, it's not going to be a huge priority for the Federal Trade Commission, but the outcomes could really affect gaming. And normally I would say that, the government more heavily regulating what is in games, the content of games, is not a good thing. But maybe it'll generally be good for gamers if these loot boxes get maybe a bit more regulated. It might turn out to be a thing that benefits us as a whole because maybe the odds get better on loot boxes. Maybe they have to print the odds and tell us what actually are our chances for getting a rare item, just like the real life lottery does in your state. Maybe they have to show you what you're going to get out of the loot box before you even open it. And yeah, so Dutch players of games that have loot boxes, they have to be shown the exact contents of the box, not what you could possibly get, the actual contents of your box before you open the loot box. So those sorts of things are things that will only benefit gamers to have some of that knowledge before you open up a loot box. Obviously, if loot boxes weren't fleecing us for money, they wouldn't be something that is such a prolific practice in gaming. Now, there have been some bills and some talk of regulating loot boxes previously in some other states. It's come up in Hawaii, which has died. It's been other states, Washington, Minnesota, California. All of these attempts to regulate loot boxes have stalled out so far, have not made it any further, haven't been, passed into law. But this is really the first time that the FTC is going to maybe sit down and actually do an investigation. The argument against loot boxes being true gambling is because unlike, pulling a slot machine, playing the lottery, you always get something out of a loot box. It might just be a common item, it might be something that you don't super care about, but you always get something for your money. It isn't a true lottery. But in reality, that's not always the case. In some games, the common item that you're getting out might be something you already have, something that you don't need for that reason. It might be something so common that it's essentially garbage to you in the game, and you are just spinning that wheel hoping to get the one rare item that you care about. I think that comes up even more interestingly in like a collectible card game, a digital collectible card game. What if the items that I get are ones I already have, like literally duplicates that don't add anything to my collection, things like that. So this is going to be an interesting outcome, I think, for sure. And I think that hopefully it'll open the eyes of parents maybe who are setting their kids loose on these loot boxes without really understanding that, oh, they're spending real money, they're charging things to my credit card, and make parents watch their children a bit closer in games. That's always going to be a good thing, having a parent involved with a child and playing a game together and understanding the media that their child is taking in. But I think as a whole, this could lead to some very, very interesting outcomes for gamers as it pertains to kind of the fairness of loot boxes and the fairness of additional purchases on top of an initial game purchase. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this as the investigation starts up, and of course as their findings come out, but certainly one to watch. So that's going to do it for Pretty Dece for today. Thank you very much for joining me to talk about the Federal Trade Commission investigating loot boxes. Certainly an interesting topic. If you want to support Pretty Dece, you can do so. It's not a loot box. You know exactly what you're going to get. Visit prettydeceshow.com/listener support to find out those details. Of course, you can listen to the podcast version. You might be doing that right now. You can find that on your favorite podcast delivery platform. You can find it in the news section of your Google Home. You can find it on Spotify, iOS, Google Play, everywhere that you can think of. You can also watch the video version on YouTube. Just visit youtube.com/prettydece to find the channel. And of course, hit me up on social media. I would love to hear your thoughts on loot boxes, whether they should or shouldn't be regulated, who should do that regulation. Let's discuss it. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @PrettyDeceShow.